Trump dropped bombs without congressional authorization, says it went awesome, but refuses to show any proof of the awesomeness to Congress or anyone else. Every 4 years in June, we must ask, is there anything for Democrats to learn from the New York City mayoral election? Then we'll talk to our friend and current U.S. Senate candidate JD Scholten about challenging Joni Ernst in Iowa. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join a majority. This is Majority 54.
Well, Jason, since we last spoke, it seems like bombers took off from your home state, right?
Yes.
And dropped those 30,000-ton bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities.
I'm glad you said it that way, because while this may be a digression, I was saying this to Diana the other night, and she was like, I don't think anyone cares about this, but I do. Like, take all the politics out for a minute, and you just think about all the stuff that is said about, I guess this is the politics, you know, it's always threatened that the American military is not as strong or lethal as it once was or whatever. Like, toward the end of my time in the military, I was briefly at an Army aviation unit that had assets at Whiteman Air Force Base where the B-2s are kept. And so I was around that. And then as Secretary of State, they actually brought me in and I got to sit in the cockpit of one and all that stuff. And I just can't begin, as someone who has been deployed for the United States in a war overseas, how strange it is to me that there are 7 or 8 or 10 aircrew dudes who live an hour from me, who a few days ago had breakfast with their wife and kid, or I don't know if they were all men or husband and kid or whatever, and then got in a plane and flew for a long time, and then came back and had breakfast again the next morning. And in the meantime, they made humongous international news and dropped bombs, big bombs on a country. If you have any doubt about the lethality and the reach of the American military, that is truly incredible.
Yeah, and so we have a couple layers of
they never landed, Ravi. They never landed. They just went up, flew, came back, and then read in the paper about what they did. It is a lethal and effective military, regardless of what else you may think.
Well, I think there's a lot of layers to what we've experienced over the past week. You've got the bombing itself and the fact that the U.S. did it directly. You have the question of the legality of it and going to Congress or not. You have the question of what our wider aims are. You have the question of whether that bombing was effective. You have the question of the truce, the tenuous truce between Israel and Iran. So we can keep going. I mean, there's just so many questions here. So let's start with the Trump administration strategy and Trump himself, right? I spent all week kind of scratching my head, and I was texting you about this, that how much energy and I would say sort of animus I bring to this issue is in many ways linked to two things. Whether the Trump administration continues this talk of regime change,
right?
Because then I think it is a much more minimal question, not trivial, but it's much less significant if we stop here. The second is all the stuff around this, right? Like Trump saying one thing one day, saying another thing the other day, not briefing congressional Democrats, not briefing a lot of people in Congress, using Truth Social to conduct military policy. And so I'll say this just at the outset. If this were the only act and he carried it out responsibly, my major question would be, was this more effective than the nuclear deal that he ripped up, right? It seems as of today, there are reasons to think it is not. So I'm still against it based on what I know today. If they had destroyed all the nuclear capacity, I think it would be a closer debate, but I would think well, if you can get it through diplomacy, which it seemed by all reporting, the nuclear enrichment and nuclear activity of Iran was on pause during that deal, then I'm like, well, if you can get it to diplomacy, you shouldn't do it by force. So I would still be against it, but it would be a much closer call. But the fact that we probably didn't destroy the nuclear capacity as of the reporting today, at least that's what we know of today, and that we only set it back a few months, and we ripped up the Iran nuclear deal, and the president is totally chaotic in and around this and still floating things like regime change, then I think it's a pretty open shut case.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I just think that there is not a lot to be gained by re-entering a war like this, like by entering a war that we were not in to get something done that, to your point, we were already probably on track to get previously, like at the beginning. And I say that as somebody who was publicly a skeptic of Obama's Iran deal. Like, it was really the only place where I broke with Obama during my campaign for the Senate. And I remember saying, this is what I think, and I hope to be proven wrong, when it was clear that the deal was going to happen. And I think I was proven wrong. And I think it's important to say that, right? Like, you know, two years into the deal, I was like, this seems to be working. It seems that I was wrong. But the Republicans and, you know, Trump world were not able to say that they were wrong.
Well, it seemed like initially when the attack happened that they had taken out, because, you know, you can't, this is why relying on Trump for anything is just a fool's errand. But
it's the problem with having a president who, as my dad would say, lies when the truth would help, is that you can't assess anything he does because you don't know what's real.
Yeah, and like in a world where they took all the nuclear facilities out, I'd be like, this is not ideal. I disagree with ripping up the Iran nuclear deal merely because Obama pushed it. But like in the grand scheme of things that keep me up at night about the Trump administration, if this is all he did, like it's like the Suleimani thing, which I actually think in hindsight was fine. So it's
but it's good that you brought that up, because the Soleimani thing seemed fine in hindsight until you remember that there were a lot of American soldiers that were hurt that ended up with TBI because of those attacks. Right now, from what we know, the retaliation attacks seem less effective this time around than they were that time around.
Yeah, I think the thing with this,
you know,
not to go down the Soleimani rabbit hole, I think part of the Soleimani thing was it all depends on how much you trust the intelligence assessments as to how important he was and how much that set back, like the proxy activity that Iran was seeding throughout the Middle East that was causing us and others trouble.
And we did it not in Iran. That's another really important point. You know?
Right. But all this to say, the reason why I'm having this big wind up, because I think it's important. As I was watching the initial reactions, there was this sort of like reflexive, like, okay, automatically everybody in my life is saying it's bad. And I'm like, okay, like I just need to independently. And I think our listeners, go through this too, because I hear from a lot of them, some of whom are like, why is this the thing we're worried about today? And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like in a world where we're snatching up people on the streets, and we still have a military presence in LA and go through your thing. Like I can forgive people for being like, is this the thing that really we should be concerned about? And I think reasonable people can disagree with that. And I think like we have people within our coalition, and I've been listening to a lot of these debates, who some of whom supported that action. And I get it, but I do think that this was a window into why Trump is a bad president, because he is so chaotic, and the norms are not just norms because they make us feel good. It actually keeps us safe when we have a president who knows what to share with the public and what not, and who has some sense of self-control. Because there are unnamed intelligence sources who are saying the single greatest threat to our national security right now is our president and his lack of self-control.
At the end of the day, this was. Let's look at it this way. If I were in the Senate and he were to come to the Senate for an authorization of use of military force and present credible intelligence that they were getting closer, I would be able to put aside, well, they're getting closer because you abandoned the Iran nuclear deal. Well, they're getting closer because, I would be able to put aside blaming whoever you are to blame for that and say, okay, there's credible evidence that Iran is close to getting a nuclear weapon. Yes, I believe that this is the right action. But the fact that he didn't do that, yes, it's erratic, but it also, as somebody who, we both lived through the Iraq era, we both, I'm sure, your brother, we have friends who had to go there. I went to Afghanistan, and I lived under the possibility of going to Iraq and all that. I volunteered for Afghanistan. And, if asked, would have gone to Iraq. It's a little too close to home for me. The idea that like, oh, trust us. This is, trust us. This country right next to the last country we attacked that didn't have WMD, but we said it did. Really, they do. They're very close, but we can't show you. But trust us. That's not okay. Like, that's not okay. And even if it turns out, which it sounds like it doesn't, but even if it turns out it was super effective and it got whatever nuclear capability they had, it's still not okay that a president who lies all the time every day is like, just trust me. It needed to happen. That's not okay.
I completely agree with you. I think the area where I went down a rabbit hole and really tried to examine my assumptions was all the Obama administration drone attacks in this country or that country, even the bin Laden raid itself. If you start to go through it, you're like, okay, like, of course one could make an independent case for the bin Laden raid, but you start to go through it and you're like, a lot of the things that people on our side are saying, this is illegal, that's illegal, and it's illegal for this reason or not. A lot of those start to fall apart if you're trying to use a consistency frame. So what I was left with at the end, and trying to be consistent, is what is wrong with this other than my hatred of Trump? And I'm like, well, it's not my hatred of Trump that is making me concerned about this. It's that the things that concern me about his presidency are on full display in this. And it's actually making everybody less safe and making it very hard to even know what's going on. We were talking about last week, like, are we even at war right now? Right.
It's almost all of the examples of Obama were done under the old AUMF, the Authorization for Use of Military Force. There are some where you could argue clearly that, the raid in Pakistan, but I think you're right that that's very separate because, they tried to say, well, there's the element of surprise. I mean, Iran knew clearly, they moved a lot of stuff. They knew for a long time that this was possibly coming, if not from us, from Israel. I mean, we were the ones with the bunker busting capacity, but we've been talking about it like they knew. So the surprise thing doesn't work for me, particularly given that everybody knew when the bombers were in the air. And not to mention the fact that they have a tendency to, put their war plans on unsecured lines. So I don't believe that they were all that worried about surprise in this case. Clearly in the Obama raid, you were. And even if you put aside the idea that, even if I were to stipulate or accept the idea, which I don't, that this is the same as some of the actions that Obama took without directly going to Congress for those exact actions. Now, never mind the fact that there were times where Obama didn't take action because Congress wouldn't support it. That happened, right? So put that aside for a minute. Assume that they're right. Outcome does not just the fact that we don't appear right now to be in a full-on continuing war with Iran does not make it okay, because that is not due to anything Trump did.
Right.
That is due to the fact that Iran decided, and maybe some people thought that they would do this, and maybe credit to, those in the Trump administration, if they made the bet that Iran would say, you know what, we're not trying to get any of that smoke from the United States. Yeah, we're going to shoot some missiles to save face, but we're going to let you know that we're shooting them. We're going to give you the opportunity to, get out of the way and get into your bunkers and all that stuff. Okay. But we are very fortunate that we are not currently in an ongoing war with Iran, it seems. But also, they weren't saying any of that. They were talking about regime change. Yeah. And they stopped, but they were going for regime change without going to Congress.
Sort of stopped. So Vance was like, this is not about regime change. And Trump kind of contradicted him just a couple of days ago, which is, again, it's why this is so erratic. We'll get to a clip about this. But let's first go to CNN reporting that initially in the past couple of days contradicted the Trump administration's sort of sweeping claims about what we accomplished.
It is worth noting here that there has been dissent, I should say, within the intelligence community, within the defense community, about just how much of an impact these massive bunker buster bombs would actually have on Iran's nuclear facilities. It was far from certain, given that these bombs had never been tested in an actual combat scenario, whether they would actually penetrate those very, very deep underground tunnels that lie underneath these nuclear facilities. And what we are told is that as of now, this defense intelligence agency assessment, it does conclude at this point, again, it is still very early, that those underground facilities, including the centrifuges, including the highly enriched uranium that everyone has been talking so much about, those are largely intact. Now, of course, this does stand at odds with what President Donald Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth have been saying in recent days about the impact of these U.S. military strikes. Of course.
And there's two things: whether we destroy the facilities, and two is whether we're able to destroy their enriched uranium, which I don't know. I'm just talking out of my ass here, but it's like the people are saying you could transport the latter like in the back of a car, and that they were able to get that out of there pretty quickly.
Let's use some common sense for a moment. Okay. Now I know that maybe I am not properly enamored with air superiority, as being the trump card that everybody wants it to be, because I'm an Army vet, and I'm used to the idea that if you want to accomplish something, you're probably going to have to put some people there. I'm not saying that's what we should do, but I'm like, usually when you win in situations like this, when you accomplish an objective, it usually requires some people to go stand on the objective. You actually have to occupy the objective. That's usually how it works. So common sense would dictate that if we've never used these bombs in a combat scenario before, these exact ones, we've never used them for this purpose, that Israel's been bombing the hell out of Iran for a pretty sustained period of time, and was saying, we can't accomplish this part of it, so we need you to bring in this ordinance in order to do it. The chance that on the very first try from 30,000 feet or so, you drop something and boom, you've accomplished the mission, and you've eliminated the nuclear threat of Iran, common sense would dictate that probably is not going to happen. And the likelihood that they were able to get stuff out of there beforehand, the likelihood that they built this stuff underground in a way that would sustain an attack from 30,000 feet, I think it's pretty high. So common sense would dictate that this intelligence is probably right.
Well, Trump was asked about it, and here's how he responded.
Stated, I got a call from Missouri, great state, that I won 3 times by a lot. And I got a call that the pilots and the people on the plane were devastated because they were trying to minimize the attack. And they all said it was hit. But we don't think it was really maybe hit that badly. And they were devastated. They put their lives on the line, and then they have, and I'm not referring to you, but real scum come out and write reports that are as negative as they could possibly be. It should be the opposite. You should make them heroes and heroines. You should make them really people that they were so devastated when they heard this news. And you know what they said? One of them, I spoke to one of them, he said, "Sir, we hit the site. It was perfect. It was dead on." Because they don't understand fake news, because they have a normal life, except they have to fly very big, very fast planes. But it's a shame. You should be making them heroes. All right.
Okay, let me say something about this. One, I don't know what him winning Missouri has anything to do with it. But two, nobody is saying they missed.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's saying that. No one's saying that. No one's saying they missed. These are giant bombs. If they missed, we'd know, because it would have hit all sorts of stuff. You know what I mean?
And by the way, if they missed, we're grown-ups. Like, we could say they missed. Like, right, I'm sorry, exactly. I don't know who these people are. Like, the fact that like our primary concern is the feelings of people who drop 30,000 bombs, pound bombs. It's like, what? Somehow we've got from the party that facts don't care about your feelings to like our people, our men and women in uniform are so fragile that if we say that we didn't accomplish our objective, that it just breaks our, so we must pretend that we did so that we could spare their feelings.
I will also tell you that that's not how that conversation went. Here's how that conversation went. That conversation went, I believe that this is a rare case, by the way, where they did call him sir. He usually makes up stories and everybody's calling him sir. But if he was speaking to actual pilots, they were calling him sir. And they were probably saying, "Sir, if the battle damage assessment is correct and we didn't take it out, we would like to go back."
Right.
That is how that likely went, if that conversation happened at all.
Right. I mean, just a bizarre. I mean, he's generally like one step ahead, I think, like intrinsically of the messaging, much to our chagrin. But on this one, I'm not sure this is working, and the polling is bearing that out. He was also asked whether he would negotiate with Iran. So this gets to our point about like other means here, and whether we can accomplish the same or more through those other means.
Sounds like the door is open, but you're in no rush. Is that right? Sounds like the door is open. But
I'll tell you what, look, we're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought. Now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not. The only thing we'd be asking for is what we were asking for before about we want no nuclear, but we destroyed the nuclear. In other words, it's destroyed. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up to kingdom come. And so I don't feel very strongly about it. If we got a document, wouldn't be bad. We're going to meet with them, actually. We're going to meet with them. Yeah.
So this is like,
straight.
can I go first on this one? Because
Go
something just clicked into place
Yes.
for me.
Oh my God.
Something just clicked into place for me. The biggest problem here is that Trump is such a liar and so unwilling to admit certain facts that what we're now going to have is a situation in which, because he refuses to admit that we didn't destroy their nuclear capacity, we're now going to have a deal or some kind of understanding with them based on the faulty premise that we did not destroy their nuclear capacity. So they can then restart it, but Trump can't acknowledge that because there was nothing to restart, which is when we get to why this is ineffective. Like, look, like, I probably am to the right of a lot of people in terms of my, even though I was against the Iraq war, I genuinely, like, when there's some kind of strike of this kind of a regime that I'm really not sympathetic to, like Iran, I'm sellable on it if it's done responsibly. But by all accounts right now, based on everything we've just seen, we are in the worst possible world, which is we didn't destroy it. Now Trump has to believe we destroyed it, which means that the deal we strike today would be worse than the one we would have struck before because Trump has to believe there is no nuclear capacity in his world. He can't believe it.
Yeah, he just said we won't have a deal because there is no nuclear program, which means Iran, just go have the nuclear program, do all you want, because we must live in the fiction that it doesn't exist. That's quite a result.
Okay, I'm getting worked up here. So here's another clip. I thought this is really like sums it up pretty well. This is Representative Ansari basically summing up the problem with the Trump administration's approach here.
Have a successful history when it comes to foreign intervention and regime change. And again, just looking at the last 10 days, the fact that within 24 hours, our president can go on social media and say, call for regime change, call for evacuation, then call for peace. This isn't how foreign policy should ever be conducted. It is chaotic. It terrifies people around the world. We're not going to build partners or allies. I mean, we have lost credibility on the world stage for so many other reasons, but this is the latest example. And that's not what I want to see for American global leadership going forward.
Yeah, fair.
Well put. All right, well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the just jaw-dropping New York City results and what that means for the country. And then we're going to welcome on our friend JD Scholten, who's running for Senate in Iowa. For men, dealing with ED can be uncomfortable, which is why HIMSS provides access to a comfortable solution with an online process and personalized treatment options. HIMSS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. HIMSS provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable tablets, Viagra, and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% less. And the process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. You just fill out an intake form on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. And with hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMSS can help you find the ED option that works for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/majority That's HIMS.com/majority for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/majority. The featured products include compounded products which are not approved nor verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. How much time, money, and energy have you spent on health, wellness, and beauty products to look and feel younger and healthier? I'm so excited to share with you guys C15 from Fatty 15, the first emerging essential fatty acid to be discovered in more than 90 years. It's an incredible scientific breakthrough to support your long-term health and wellness, and you guessed it, healthy aging. Fatty 15 co-founder Dr. Stephanie Van Watson discovered the benefits of C15 while working with the U.S. Navy to continually improve the health and welfare of aging dolphins. Based on over 100 studies, we know that C15 strengthens our cells and is a key healthy aging nutrient which helps to slow biological aging at the cellular level. In fact, when our cells don't have enough C15, they become fragile and age faster. And when our cells age, our bodies age too. Fatty 15 is a science-backed, award-winning, patented, 100% pure C15 supplement. It's vegan-friendly, free of flavors, allergens, or preservatives. Fatty 15 has 3 times more cellular benefits than omega-3 or fish oil. I love taking Fatty 15 and I see the benefits every day. Best of all, Fatty 15 comes in a gorgeous reusable glass and bamboo jar, and refills are shipped right to your door. Fatty 15 is on a mission to optimize your C15 levels to help support your long-term health and wellness, especially as you age. You can get additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/majority. That's fatty15.com/majority and using the code majority at checkout. Well, Jason, we talked about this last week, this Mamdani versus Cuomo race. How is this playing across the country? Because, we talked about how much of a national story it was, and then we got the results, and all I could see is from Twitter, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN. I'm just seeing wall-to-wall coverage of this today and last night. How is it hitting on your side of the country?
It is something that people who are actively in progressive politics talk about. I've seen progressive activists here in Kansas City who are very excited about the results, and those are the only people who know the results. Is how I would say it's playing. I'm going to playing a doubleheader with my baseball team tonight. It will not come up.
Yeah,
Iran might. It will not come up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw that the governor of Mississippi tweeted about it. There's those kind of folks trying to make a statement.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you some takeaways on both the New York centric side of things. Then we can talk about the national side. First of all, we talked about it last week, and I have to say, of all the things we talked about in a while, I don't know if I've gotten nastier messages from some of our audience than that one. And I
knew it was going to happen when I didn't even know anything about the race, to be honest. And
you
just
think I attacked the man's
into
character, but the thing is, I kept it all about his policies, and actually, and I barely talked about his experience, right? Which we could have spent a lot of time on. And this is what I would say. The kind of messages that we're getting is you're becoming your father. It's personal attacks, meaning I'm becoming MAGA. I'm a neoliberal. I'm not a Democrat, and I'm look. For those people who send me messages like that, this is a podcast about appealing to people across the aisle, okay? So if me not being totally on board with a self-described socialist who's 33 years old, who's never had a managerial job for a job of, governing 8 million people, who has policies, like them or not, that, are up for debate, like rent freezes and public supermarkets, and relinquishing control of the New York City schools, right? Those are things that I could imagine if you're listening to this podcast, you would think are fair game, where some people can agree and some people won't. I said at the time I wasn't sure what I was going to do about Cuomo. People were calling me a Cuomo apologist and all that. Well, I'm not voting for Cuomo for reasons I tweeted about, and I didn't vote for Mamdani either. But for those people, I'm just what are you listening for? If you think I'm out of bounds, then what are you going to say to your Trump voting relatives or the independents who swing one way or the other? Come on. This has to be fair game. The guy has been a self-described socialist, right? And I'm not even here on this podcast today to cast aspersions on that idea or anything like that. I'm just saying that, or I might offer a gentle critique here and there, but he won. That has to be within bounds of respectful debate. And you know how I know that? He's respectful about it. So if you're his supporter, you might want to just examine yourself. Like,
Well,
yeah.
since you know, you really put it on my radar last week, and so then I started following and watching some of the clips, and I will say, to your point, like, he has done a very good job having conversations about the things that people are concerned about.
Right.
I saw the clip of him and Brad Lander on Colbert. That was really well done. Like, and clearly Brad Lander has given him a lot of help. So, and now we've exhausted everything I know about this race. So back to you.
Okay, let's start with just Harry Enten kind of framing what Harry Enten's saying here on CNN is I would say writ large, like the sort of undertone of a lot of the coverage here.
The people who hate this result the most are the Democratic establishment. We have seen poll after poll after poll showing Democratic voters fed up with their leaders in Washington, fed up with their leaders in government. And all of a sudden, Andrew Cuomo, who 5 years ago was leading those COVID, press conferences, was this guy who was held up in such high esteem. And now all of a sudden, the best he can do is what, 37%?
62%.
So I think like this is one of those things that is both true and not true. Like the Democratic establishment, quote unquote, some elements of it definitely were behind Cuomo. Bill Clinton, Bloomberg, who I would imagine is some people would say is the establishment now, yada, yada, yada. And a lot of this is New York centric, right? Specific to Cuomo. At the same time, there were a lot of people who were either explicitly for him or were very warm to him that are very powerful forces within the party.
Him
like,
being who?
Mamdani.
Okay.
He had a very favorable appearance on Pod Save America. A lot of these organizations, whether it's the Working Families Party or Run for Something, and all these groups that propped up like around Arena, the group I founded, and after the Trump election the first time, a lot of those groups were either explicitly for him or very warm to him, right? And he enjoyed Mamdani lots of favorable coverage, and or just like respectful coverage every step of the way. Now, there was a lot of money that poured in behind Cuomo from certain elements, yes, of the Democratic establishment. Those folks in that part of the establishment absolutely were super alarmed by him, but it was also a lot of non-Democrats. It was like Bill Ackman and people like that were throwing a lot of money behind him, a lot of Republicans like the Gristedes guy and all that. So I think there's a simplistic sense that it was the establishment versus the non-establishment. There's plenty of establishment people for him, plenty of established people and people who are against him. And also doesn't neatly fall within the age point either, right? Like Bernie Sanders and a lot of these people who are not exactly getting their backs up about Biden's age and pushing Biden out, AOC being another example of it, right? People would accuse her of being a Biden dead ender, which I don't necessarily think that term's helpful anymore. Were behind Mamdani, some of those folks. But then there were a lot of people who wanted Biden to drop out early who were behind Cuomo. So it's like, it wasn't this like, okay, the people who want the old people in power generally are behind Cuomo, and then the people who want the young people in power are behind Mamdani. So I think that was a very sloppy narrative coming out of this. But I do think some of the lessons learned here, you can kind of go in order of like, what are the lessons that I think everybody can agree on? And what are the lessons we probably, there's some dispute about? Like the idea that somebody runs as authentically themselves, that runs an energetic campaign, that is willing to defy convention, say what they believe, even if they're told that it's not the popular thing to say. Like you can go down that list, and just the way he campaigned, the way he combined retail campaigning with really smart use of social media. Those are all things I think we can agree. And the fact that he was young and that like captivated a lot of people, and then he spoke and looked and carried himself very differently than a candidate in Cuomo who ran a very shoddy conventional campaign and was afraid to speak to voters, didn't go on the podcast, didn't use social media, ducked a lot of scrutiny. Like I think at the base level, at the highest level, I think everybody agrees, whether they supported Mamdani's policies or not, that is something we can learn from.
Yeah, I think back to, and I've said this on the show before, to something that a great Kansas City Politico said to me many, many years ago, Mary O'Halloran. So people from Kansas City will know Mary. She said to me many, many years ago that The Obama campaign was the perfect intersection of a man and a message. The message was change, and the man was a change. And when those two things intersect, when the candidate and the message perfectly intersect, it is sort of a magical thing. And I think that there is something going on in the party right now that I would describe as a youth movement. But I think that it is not enough for a candidate to be young and to be looking and to be challenging or opposing someone who is not, or who's been establishment or been around for a long time. The message and the candidate must also meet. And in this case, regardless of the, I'm sure, very valid things that you've brought up, I don't know, I don't live in New York City, about, your skepticism about the policies are aimed at addressing things that people of our generation and the generation, younger than us are very concerned about. The price of rent, the price of everything, right? Basic fairness in the economy. And so when you have a very young, energetic candidate, regardless of how they're addressing those things as central part of the campaign, it's a pretty good example of the man and the message perfectly intersecting and it creating a bit of a magical moment.
Yeah, and I have this friend, Isaac Saul, who runs this newsletter, Tangled, and he and this guy, Bradley Tusk, who's like a New York political operative, who I did a podcast on Lost Debate today, all about this issue. They both said something similar, and to my estimation, neither were Mamdani supporters, but both said, look, now it's time to help him be successful. Anybody who lives in New York, that's their job, and I fundamentally believe that. And what Isaac was saying was like, this idea of socialism or democratic socialism, which is a very different thing in some ways, it boils down to, can we make government work on behalf of the most vulnerable and really anybody? And that is whether you call yourself a socialist, you call yourself a democratic socialist, or you're a little bit more on the libertarian end that, as I am, but you're still like, I want Medicaid to be awesome. I want Social Security to be run really well. I want awesome public schools. Like even if I want to bite off less, we can all agree that we want the government to deliver, because number one, that creates great outcomes for people. It makes the world a better place. And two, it is the most effective critique against attacks on the Democratic Party. So you throw the label out. We all have the same goal. And I live in New York, so I definitely have that goal. And so where I sit today is like, look, everybody heard my critiques last week. The debate now comes down to, for people who are within the party, especially people who live in New York or want to learn something from New York, is, well, what next, right? And there are two tweets, and then I'll play a clip of Mamdani himself that I think helps lay out the two different interpretations of this race and why they're important. The first one is from Matthew Iglesias, who by most accounts is a centrist. He said, it's fair to hit Mamdani with old tweets, but the fact that his 2025 campaign sounded nothing like his tweets from 2020, to me, is in fact a sign that wokeness is in deep remission. And what he's saying is, look, this guy moderated throughout the race. That's his argument. Now, on the other side of this debate is Waleed Shahid, who I think came out of the Justice Democrats. And he said, yes, there were vibes, but Zohran Mamdani didn't win on style alone. He won on rent freezes, free buses, public groceries, a clear stand against billionaire politics, and U.S. support for Gaza's destruction. There was against billionaire politics and against U.S. support for Gaza's destruction. There was style, but there was a whole lot of substance, and Dan Pfeiffer retweeted that. So basically he's saying, yes, actually it was his policies that won him this race. And it's those particular policies, which, like them or not, are like probably enjoy more support on the left of the party. So what is it? What is going on here? My word isn't gospel here, but what I'm starting to sense is that Mamdani himself is wrestling with this question. And my read on him is that he's consistent on what he thinks the problem is, which is affordability. But I actually think throughout the race, he started to learn that, hey, actually, like, the tools at my disposal to solve affordability, actually, I actually want to bring more tools to bear. And he's not willing to say, yeah, I'm going to like abandon rent freezes and things like that. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But he's starting to come along and start to see certain things that I, and I think a lot of people who lived in New York, people would call like a centrist, like the red tape stuff. Like, he's starting to see that as an obstacle to the most vulnerable too. And as evidence for this, I'm going to play this clip from his appearance on Derek Thompson's podcast last week.
I think it's really important that if we're going to ask voters to give us the power to add new government functions, we have to prove that government can function in the first place.
Exactly.
And reporting out this book with Ezra was really interesting. And I'll be honest, it's sometimes almost blackpilling. Like, it did not make me a libertarian. I'm still a proud liberal. I believe in an aggressive, muscular government. But it was astonishing sometimes to see that these examples of government failure were not exceptions to a rule, but in some cases, something tragically close to the rule itself. And I wonder if you've had a similar experience of coming into government, coming closer to government functions, and recognizing that some things just don't work the way they should. Can you put some meat on those bones of what you've seen that's made you so passionate about not just announcing new public functions, but proving public excellence?
I very much agree. And I think what's been frustrating is that even the very language of this conversation, language around bureaucracy, efficiency, waste, even quality of life, we've allowed this language to be seen as if it is of a right-wing concern, when in fact, this should be the most paramount left-wing concern, because it is either the fulfillment or the betrayal of that which motivates so much of our politics.
So I played this clip because this is what he sounded like towards the end. He didn't abandon the other ideas, but he was starting to talk more like this. Now, a cynical explanation is he was trying to win over moderates, which he did win over moderates with some of this stuff. But the other explanation, which could also coexist with the cynical explanation, it's not mutually exclusive, is that he actually believes it too. Like, he was starting to want to win over moderates, and he's like, hey, I'm like trying to learn. I'm 33. I'm like starting to like anybody interact with these abundance ideas, etc. And the reason why I play this is because if you hate my analysis of Mamdani, the one thing I want you to keep in mind is that he doesn't believe my vision of what can make New York more affordable is mutually exclusive with what he had previously been proposing. And if he is right, then maybe we can bridge this divide and keep a big tent, and we could actually deliver better services while accomplishing certain things through more aggressive government intervention, like rent freezes, which I'm probably more skeptical of, but we can put those side by side with things like deregulatory actions, which he seems to be dipping his toe in that water, which are things I'm more into than probably you might be into. And if we could do those things together, we can try multiple things simultaneously and make the world more affordable and keep the tent big.
I am 44 years old, and I've had this podcast for several years. I've been very active in politics in a lot of different ways, and I am still day to day figuring out exactly what I think about politics, because our politics change. And I frequently, I don't know if it's frequently, but I certainly more than occasionally update my views. Maybe not change my views all the time. I do sometimes, but I referenced it earlier with the Iran deal, for instance. I do change my mind sometimes, but I'm frequently trying to update what I think. And when I was 33 years old, I had already served 2 years as a statewide elected official in Missouri and 2 terms as a state legislator in Missouri. And I'd been to war. And I was very much still updating what I believed about politics. And so I think it is important to give him credit for the idea that he has a foundational set of principles and a foundational set of things that he believes in. And I think clearly he has, at least early in his career, expressed those through some very bold progressive policies. And the reason that language tends to moderate as you get closer to an election is, yes, you're trying to bring in more voters, but it's also because as you get closer to an election, you're also getting closer to potentially governing. And that means you're getting closer to the reality of your ideas running up against how they're going to work. And so that's a very natural thing. Ironically, it is the person who he vanquished's father who said to us that we campaign in poetry and we govern in prose. And this is all why mayoral elections are typically imperfect measures of the national mood, because actually governing a city, which is, by the way, in most cases made up from a governing perspective of like 80% Democrats to begin with, but actually governing a city requires you to take all of these larger beliefs and policy ideas and then put them into action. And they frequently look very differently when you do that. And so I think you're right that if he's going to be mayor, people like you who have had a lot of reservations about his policy ideas are now in the position to say, okay, so how do we take your vision and your goals and make it work in New York City? And it does sound to me like he's game for that conversation, which is pretty cool. And that could be good for the party nationally, because as you said, the best argument for progressive ideas is progress people can see. And there's no better place to see it than New York City, because a lot of people go there.
Yeah, and people, if they want to hear more about like the impending race between him and Eric Adams and all that, you can go to Lost Debate. We did 45 minutes on it today with somebody who's even more of an expert on New York City politics than I am. Well, with that, Jason, it's exciting to welcome on our friend Jebediah Dilford Scholten. I was just making up. We were guessing what the JD was before this.
We don't
JD.
know. He'll reveal
JD,
it.
is that right? Did you hear that? Did we get your name right? We're just trying to guess what the JD was.
What does JD stand for? He's having trouble hearing us. Okay.
No, I didn't have the effect. I was going to try to get him into a panic mode over the name.
Okay,
why don't we brag on him as a baseball player while he's getting set up?
Yeah, I will begin to introduce JD. I don't usually, in fact, people who listen to the show know that I never just read what people put on their website about themselves. I usually make some changes to it and kind of try and make it slightly more impartial or complete when I bring them on. But I'm with JD, his sort of perfectly does sum him up. And so I'm going to read that. Before I do, I will say, because there are people listening to this right now who pay attention to the U.S. Senate race in Iowa, we are aware that our friend JD is not the only Democratic candidate in Iowa. Frankly, he's not our only friend. I can speak for myself who's in the race. And so he also will not be the only one who comes on the show. So just know that, everybody. But here's what JD has on his website to describe himself. He says, the median age of a U.S. senator is 65, and their average wealth sits at nearly $2 million. I am 20 years younger and $2 million shy of that average. We need a government that represents the interests of the 99% and not the 1%. I'm a baseball-playing, beer-drinking, Bible-reading, working-class, proud prairie populist from Sioux City, and I fundamentally believe we deserve more than a GoFundMe broken healthcare system, a JBS food system, and a Dollar General economy. As JD has now got the headphones on and appears ready. Before we ask him what the JD stands for, because we were speculating before you came on, I will say that it is pretty unique, JD, that you are currently in your final year as a professional baseball player and also running for the United States Senate. So that is, I mean, that's when you were 12, at least half of that is what you had in mind.
Exactly. Yeah, life is a little bit strange right now, no doubt about that. But yeah, it's why do one completely exhausting and passionate thing when you can do two? So here we are. But yeah, so JD, not Juris Doctorate or anything like that. James is after my dad. And then the thing that most people don't guess, but it's Dennis. And that's my maternal grandfather.
Okay. That's pretty good. Well, before we talk about politics, let me say, Ravi, I've said it on here before. JD is the best pitcher I've ever had the opportunity to play behind during a game. He has come down and pitched for my amateur men's team, the Hustlers, before.
He was a ringer. I was gonna send in some. I was gonna tip off your opponents. About
We have been accused of using him as a ringer, but we've used him enough that he is not a ringer, I would argue. I am excited that JD is retiring from professional baseball because it's going to allow me to get him to come and play more often when we play in tournaments. But I will the quick baseball anecdote I'll tell is that the first time JD came down to pitch, I said, he got out of the car and I said, all right, well, we'll try and get you some runs, like some run support on our side. And he said, just get me one. And we won that game 9-0. And I think he allowed 2 hits. So,
well, JD, one thing I have to thank you for is we spoke before the election this year. I don't know if you remember this. And basically we were hyped up about the impending Harris Iowa win. And I tweeted it out, and I think it's the most retweeted thing I've ever had. I think I might have wound up deleting it because so many people were dunking on me after the election. I think it rivals the Josh Allen's better than Mahomes tweet I had, where all the KC people kept, even I think like 2 years later, they kept responding to it. And then they started, I think I deleted it and then they screenshot it and still were responding to it. So those are the 2 tweets I think that have just lived on and like a disease don't seem to go away in my life. So thank you both actually for those 2.
All right. Before you just talk about, who you are and the race and all that stuff, let's start, JD, with this, I just read this article about JBS in the New York Times, and you actually have JBS, the meatpacker, listed in your bio as one of the reasons that you're running. And it's probably a pretty good window into your motivations. So why don't you just talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, so this is one of the races, like I was not planning on this for a long time or anything like that. It's just one of those things that just kind of came about. And so at the beginning of this year, when the inauguration happened, I saw the tech billionaires all in front row there, and they all donated $1 million each to the inauguration. And I just thought that was very symbolic of what's happening in this country. But the reality is JBS donated $5 million. They did the most. And so what we're seeing right now is they have over $256 million worth of corruption fines. And the Trump administration is now waiving the Foreign Corruption Policy Act, any charges on there. So now they can become a public traded entity. And so that's JBS being one of the largest meat packing companies in the world, if not the largest, and one of the most corrupt companies in the world. And so that's, I feel, so symbolic of what's happening in this nation, where these monopolies are really hurting the everyday folks. I think the perfect spotlight was during COVID, when you had farmers being squeezed on pricing. You have workers working at these places for low wages and tough situations. And then you have consumers paying the most they ever have for meat, all the while all these meat packers were making record profits during that time. And so all that added together, that's one of the things why I wanted to bring this, because people feel this.
There's only 3 or 4 meat packers basically in this country, right? They're the most consolidated industry we have. I think, JD, is your audio okay over there? Oh, I think it was.
He's having trouble hearing us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll talk for him for a second. So, JD's having technical issues.
Sorry.
You got us? Can you hear us now? We'll keep talking, so we'll know when he can hear us.
Well, Jason, what I was going to talk about is just the consolidation of the industry. I think it's only 3 or 4 companies that control basically all of meatpacking, and they're harder to get into, a lot of these meatpacking facilities, than are just to get into Langley or the Pentagon. They're so secretive, they don't want anybody to see the weird shit that goes on behind there. And this was topical recently because of the immigration enforcement. So it seemed like we don't want, to be clear, ICE to be going to these meatpacking plants, but it is interesting that Trump seemed to get his back up once the enforcement was hitting that area. Oh, now we're getting
now we get the feedback, JD. We can hear you, but it's coming back. So I think Jeremy just turned it. Here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna talk about you and look at you.
Yeah.
So all right. Jeremy's got it fixed now where we can talk. He'll turn off your mic and it'll work. All right. So we were just talking about JBS and the monopoly side. You've really leaned into this, not only in your own time running for Congress and then serving in the state legislature, but you are, I think, rightfully very much a believer in the idea that monopolies should be a huge part of at least the economic messaging of the Democratic Party, to the point where you filed legislation to do something about the monopoly effect on Major League Baseball broadcasts. So anyway, tee off on that subject for a moment.
Well, I think it's, first of all, it should be anti-monopoly.
Yeah, sorry.
The Democrats should be anti-monopoly because the concentration of power, I think Judge Brandeis said it the best when he served. He said, we have a decision to make. You can have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, or you can have a democracy, but you cannot have both. And so the reason I was so passionate about end Major League blackouts when it comes to baseball, I'm passionate about baseball, and it may not be as exciting for other people, but I feel it's symbolic of what's happening outside in all industries, where you have billionaire owners trying to maximize wealth for themselves. Meanwhile, everyday fans who are buying a subscription are limited with the access they have. And so I feel it's just a symbolic way of showing what's happening right now. And I'm very passionate about these issues. It's one of those things that, when I ran for Congress in 2018 in a district Trump won by 27, I didn't have consultants telling me what to say. I went out there, held town halls, hundreds of town halls all across the state, talked to people who will always vote for me and never vote for me and everywhere in between. And this got brought up and they felt this squeeze. And so for me, That's why I do my Substack called "You're Probably Getting Screwed," because there's just that sentiment out there, and we need to highlight some of these things because this is a winning message. I've overperformed the top of the ticket in every single race I've been in, and it's because of issues like this and just being out there for everyday Americans.
In fact, I think in this last election, weren't you the only Democrat to win outside of the major cities in Iowa?
I'm the only Democrat in 42 counties in Northwest and North Central Iowa. So I consider myself a blueberry in a bowl of tomato soup. And so it's tough out here, but at the same time, people are frustrated, and it's not just Democrats that are frustrated. There's a whole lot of people. So that's where, what are we doing as Democrats to get into a lot of these towns, the Carrolls, the Fort Dodges, the Mason cities? And so that's why I'm so excited about our campaign. We've proven what we can do when you get out there to the people, prove you're trustworthy, and you have a message like this. We talk about fight, fix, secure every single day. Fight for universal health care, fix the economy so it works for everyone, not just the billionaires and the multinational corporations, and then secure our democracy from the special interests and the billionaires that are dictating it.
JD, Iowa seems to have a special relationship with two planks of Trump's economic policy and just, domestic policy generally. One is immigration and one is tariffs. And how, I've spent some time in some of these areas that you've represented, like Wright County. These are some of the most rural places in America, fairly remote. How are tariffs and immigration enforcement landing in a place like Iowa?
Well, when it comes to tariffs, like the first trade war, we're still suffering from that because we've lost the soybean market. The same multinational corporations that sold Iowa soybeans to China are down in Brazil selling Brazilian soybeans to China. And we spent decades getting into that market and just lost like that. When it comes to immigration, I vividly remember going to Jefferson, Iowa. They have an elevator there. They need 39 employees for the harvest, and they don't get one American citizen to apply for those jobs. And so what does that mean for them? We have a workforce shortage here in Iowa. We need to have some sort of common sense immigration reform. We have to be strong at the border, but we have a workforce shortage. We need workers here. Meatpacking plants need workers here. All our agriculture economy is struggling when it comes to a workforce shortage. And so it's different here. You still hear the Republicans still beat the drum of everything when it comes to immigration, but at the same time, the reality is a lot of the folks who work in these industries know that they're reliant on an immigrant workforce.
Are you seeing any enforcement in Iowa, like either on the ag side, the meatpacking side, or just anywhere else?
Yeah, I hear things we don't know. I have people all across the state who've reached out to me who are worried because of masked men might take their kids who are just because of the color of their skin, and they're American citizens, and that's the problem. The frustrating thing is they're in Iowa. A lot of these folks are in Iowa because there's jobs here. So what responsibility do these corporations have? I think that's a huge part of the immigration that we aren't discussing enough about, and saying like, hey, maybe there is a public-private partnership that we could potentially have down the road. But we have to, what's happening right now is not working for most folks.
Talk to us a little. Look, the question that you're obviously going to get asked every time, and that we're obliged to ask, is like, how do you win, right? Like, Iowa's been pretty Republican lately. So give us the pitch, paint the picture, and no pun intended, give us the pitch, paint the picture as to how Iowa, and particularly this race against Joni Ernst, is winnable.
Yeah, so I think the general idea that there is going to be some sort of a Democratic wave, that itself is not going to give us a win here in Iowa. We have to be more than that. And so there's a lot of little things I saw in 2018 that's why I jumped on a race that, even though the district, the 4th district in 2016 voted for Trump at 27%. Well, we moved the needle 24 points in 2018 and nearly pulled that off. And so a lot of the same things align. There's a lot of people frustrated, and there's a lot of people who are frustrated with both parties and the economy. And so when you go out there and have your message and you hold as many town halls as we do. And it's about getting out there. I feel a huge part of our campaign was Sioux City Sioux, our Winnebago RV. Well, we're trying to bring that back. And so we're doing a massive push for fundraising. And if folks are interested, you can go to ScholtenforIowa.com. And it's about getting out there to the people. So I firmly believe if you have a strong message, you get out there to the people, prove you're trustworthy, you're going to earn votes. And that's how I almost won in a district that had 80,000 more Republicans than Democrats.
All right. Where are you pitching next?
I'm in the bullpen as of right now. So the legislative session ran long. So I was put on the Phantom DL to start the season. And so that didn't allow me to get in the rotation right away. And our starters have been lights out. So we've been pitching real well. We're neck and neck with the Monarchs, Kansas City Monarchs for first place. And we're, I think, 10 or 11 games over 500. We're doing great. So I'll just, if they need me in the bullpen, I'll take that. But so I don't know. And that's a tough part because so many people are like, oh, we want to go when you pitch. I'm like, well, I'm in the bullpen. It's tough. So,
well, okay. But you are retiring as a professional baseball player, regardless of the outcome. So in future years, I'm going to be able to get you to some of these travel tournaments because I know that in addition to being a great pitcher, that in college, prior to transferring to Nebraska, you were a pretty serious hitter, didn't you? Weren't you like on track to set the RBI record at your college?
Yeah, at Morningside. I played for my dad at Division II level. Yeah. So, and I'm not gonna lie, the congressional baseball team is been pretty supportive so far and interested in getting me elected. So
I bet I saw him bunt down 11-0, which was about the best metaphor for Democratic politics over the last few years I've seen. You
know how much crap my teammates gave me because of that?
I bet. Well, mine too, and I'm not.
Well, but it's great. Like these guys, like Democrats are spending $20 million in DC to try to figure out how to talk to young men. I get paid a couple $1,000 a month to do it every single day.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
All right. Well, regardless of the outcome of the race, I will be recruiting you to come pitch some travel stuff. Once you are no longer a pro and therefore eligible to pitch an amateur ball. Ravi, do you have any baseball questions or are we going to let JD go?
No, I don't care about baseball. I hear enough about it from Jason.
Yeah, he hears a lot about it.
Right. I know. I listen.
Yeah. Thanks, JD.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Be safe out there.
Appreciate you too.
All right. All right, Ravi. You got to go in a minute, and so do I. What's new?
What's happening? Well, I was upstate last week, and I had this moment, made me think of Majority 54, because I was sitting at this like bar that's at a bookstore in upstate New York, and and by the way, I ran into our old friend Shiro, who ran Wonder, that used to produce this podcast. She lives up there now. But it was the night of the mayoral election in this tiny town. And so all the people in the bookstore put the laptop up and they were watching this mayoral debate. And I'm listening to it. And two funny things happened. One was I'm like asking, there's like all your little like kind of civically involved people. And I kept peppering them with questions without even thinking about it. I'm like, well, what's this? Why does this person say this? And at a certain point, somebody was like, you have to shut up. I want to listen to this debate. So that was number one. And two is that this was the nastiest debate I've ever heard.
Really?
And it's like a little town debate over like land usage and stuff like this. But it was also infused with this abundance talk and regulatory stuff that we were just talking about Mamdani. So it was like really interesting. So that was like my little like Majority 54 Civics moment there. And I basically like left the bar because I was like, I'm not gonna sit here and listen to this debate. Nobody was talking because they were watching this thing. The
lower the stakes or the smaller the stakes, man, the hotter the passions. I mean,
huge controversy, Jason, around the incumbent mayor. His mic wasn't working, so he was passing the mic back and forth between him and the moderator, which means he looked like he was more like in sync. So there's a lot of accusations that was planned.
How big of a town is this?
I mean, we're talking a couple thousand, maybe.
No, I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. I mean, I've been to all sorts of places politically. I was in Ferguson, all that else, and I always say the most afraid I've ever been for my own safety during a political event was probably a neighborhood meeting about the potential of a dog park being put in while I was running for state legislature. That's the cops had to be called and all that kind of stuff. So that's how it goes, man. That's how it goes. The closer you get to the ground, the more people were like, they were making their own homemade yard signs about it, no dog park and stuff like that, like using old yard signs. Anyway, and it was just one block,
Heated, man. Heated.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was fun. Thanks everybody for listening.
Oh, can I make one plug, Jason? Sorry for
do
the. I've been mentioning that I'm looking for certain profiles of people, and so many people have been reaching out. This is for a book I'm writing that's coming out in a year, and I'm still looking for somebody who has done what I call a mental marathon, which is like, did you learn a new language? Did you learn chess late in life? Did you learn to become a memory champion, memorize poetry or whatever? But something that like really tested your memory and your cognitive performance. And ideally you did it within like a year time frame. And I'm also still looking for somebody who has done the equivalent of what I call like a skill sabbatical. Like maybe your kids went off to college, you retired, you were between jobs, and you went like all in really deep in something for a year. So if any of those things apply to you, you can DM me on Instagram at Ravi M. Gupta, or you can go to ravimgupta.com. I have a contact page. You can just email me. If you've already emailed me and I haven't responded yet, don't worry about it. It goes into a place where we evaluate it for fit and all that. And we'll try to get back to everybody who's gotten in touch with us. But I thank you if you have.
All right. And again, you can listen to the other show, The Game Within, which is on Valor Media Network. It streams live at 2:30 on 2:30 Central on Mondays, drops an audio on Monday evenings. It's the show where we talk about the intersection of sports and politics. Please leave a 5-star review here. Thank you to the Mighty. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.